Welcome to Rock Center Shorts, brought to you by the Stanford Rock Center for Corporate Governance. I'm Mike Callahan, and our guest today is Priya Huskins, Senior Vice President, Management Liability, and board member at Woodruff Sawyer, a board member of Realty Income Corporation, and lucky for us, an advisory board member here at the Rock Center. Thank you, Priya, for being here.
My pleasure, Mike.
So I want to start with one of two questions. The first is, what areas are top of mind for you as board hot topics as we start 2021?
Well, thanks for that question, Mike. When I think about hot topics with my board member hat, of course, I'm thinking about the health of the business and what does the board need to do planfully and deliberately in order to execute on our strategy for 2021. With my advisor to directors and officers of public companies hat on, I have two buckets of risk for you. Normal risk and emerging risk. And in the normal risk, I am talking about D&O litigation, typical stock drop litigation. And I'll remind you that in 2019, 5% of public companies were sued, basically an all-time high. The good news is that in 2020, it dropped to 4%. So the right direction, I think we'd all agree, but that's still about 2x what we saw at the beginning of the decade. So in terms of hot topics, where to be on your guard, typical disclosure stock drop suits. The more difficult category is emerging risk. And not surprisingly, we have COVID in there. Remember, there were 20 COVID-related suits in 2020. Companies, because the pandemic is continuing, companies will continue to have to do disclosure on this topic. So we'll see more of that. Unfortunately, we will continue to see bankruptcies, and directors and officers are sometimes sued in the context of bankruptcy. But the big one in my mind is breach of fiduciary duty suits brought derivatively. Remember that those don't require a stock drop. It just requires an aggrieved shareholder. Remember too that for Delaware and California corporations, those settlements cannot be indemnified. It's all insurance. And plaintiffs are quite emboldened. You'll remember the Wells Fargo settlement for $240 million in 2019. And unfortunately, in 2020, we had some more blockbuster settlements. So think about American Realty, about $286 million. McKesson, another very large one, Equifax, Tesla. These are big numbers. That's very encouraging for the plaintiffs' bar. And then the Delaware court has had a series of cases, Bluebell Marchand series of cases, that also are providing encouragement for the plaintiffs. Now, the good news on that front, though, is remember that breach of fiduciary duty suits are all about the board. And so that means that board members are actually in a position to be thoughtful when it comes to meetings and the actual minutes of the meetings. All of that will help. And my advice is be on your game when it comes to potential breach of fiduciary duty suits.
Thanks, Priya, for that. And related to the management of that risk, what's the D&O market look like from your perspective for 2021?
Well, here's the good news. It's not going to be worse than what we've seen last year. So, those of you that think about D&O insurance ever are probably aware that it has been a catastrophic market. I think the technical term I've been using is dumpster fire. It's been very, very bad. As always, we can categorize, make some distinctions. For mature public companies, they have been feeling a lot of pain, but in fact, their actual outlay of cash for this insurance is much less than the worst category, which is companies going public, be that IPOs, direct listings, or de-SPACs. So for mature public companies, the thing we are concerned about is we did see increases in 2020. My firm did a survey of insurance underwriters at the end of last year, which tell us insurance underwriters are not feeling that they're being compensated adequately for the risk. There is some data that may suggest they're not wrong. And so with that in mind, we aren't surprised to see some companies continuing to get actually very significant increases. But for those companies that saw significant, material percentage increases year over year for the last 2 years, it may not be so bad in the 2021 cycle, but be ready. We aren't seeing prices suddenly drop, not by a long shot. There's a little bit of new capacity in the market, but not enough to make a big change in a short period of time. The headline, though, for most folks is what's going on with IPOs, where at the end of last year, the first 10 million, the mean price, so, just an average, was about $2 million for the first 10 million of limit. And that was over let's call it $15 million deductible. So eye-popping numbers, and we are continuing to see numbers of that sort. What I'm hoping is that the IPO pricing will at least stabilize. The win here is if it doesn't continue to go up. And again, we're seeing early signs of why that may be the case, but it's not happening fast. And so this is a place where directors and officers will want to get ahead of the curve and talk to your broker about what's happening, what to expect.
Terrific. Thank you, Priya, for those insights, and we'll wrap it up here.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for watching.